Today, we're diving into a 17th century poem that was so much more than just literature. It was a sharp, devastating political weapon. We are talking about John Dryden's absolute masterwork, Absalom and Achitophel.
So, let me ask you something. Imagine you're in a kingdom that's basically a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark to start a civil war. You want to defend your king, you want to publicly call out his enemies, but if you do, well, you could end up in prison or way worse. So how do you do it? How do you attack the most powerful people in the country and get away with it? Well, back in 1681, a poet named John Dryden came up with a genius solution.
Dryden's big idea was to wrap his political attack inside a story that everyone already knew, but with a hidden, explosive message just waiting to be found. So, on the surface, the poem seems pretty straightforward. It's a retelling of a famous biblical tale about King David and his handsome, super popular son, Absalom, who gets tragically talked into rebelling against his own dad. You know, it's a classic story of betrayal, ambition, all that good stuff. But here's the thing. Anybody reading this back then knew this wasn't just some Sunday school lesson. Nope, this was a political allegory, a coded takedown aimed right at the most powerful men in England who were trying to cause chaos. You can honestly think of it as one of the first and maybe the most elegant diss tracks ever written. So how did this whole coded message actually work? Well, to really get its power, we have to crack the code. Let's look at who was really who in Dryden's poetic hit job. And this is where it gets really clever. Look how perfectly the pieces fit. The wise, maybe a little too forgiving King David, that was King Charles II. The good-looking, charismatic, but rebellious son, Absalom, he was the stand-in for the Duke of Monmouth, who was Charles's illegitimate but super popular son. And that sneaky, evil advisor, Achitophel, the one whispering poison in Absalom's ear, well, that was the Earl of Shaftesbury, the king's biggest political enemy. And you can see just how perfect this comparison was. Both Absalom and the Duke of Monmouth were these beloved, charismatic guys. But, and this is key, they were both illegitimate sons, and they were both being used by ambitious men who saw them as a perfect pawn to grab power for themselves. Dryden doesn't even paint Monmouth as pure evil. He makes him a tragic figure, a victim of his own ambition and some really bad advice. But look, a good diss track isn't just about what you say, it's all about how you say it. And Dryden's style, that was his secret weapon. Just listen to this couplet. Plots, true or false, are necessary things to raise up commonwealths and ruin kings. I mean, wow. He's basically saying that in politics, conspiracies, it doesn't even matter if they're real or totally fake, are useful tools. Rebels use them to grab power and kings use them to hold on to it. It's so sharp, so cynical, and just devastatingly on point. The technique he's using to deliver these killer lines is called the heroic couplet. It sounds fancy, but it's pretty simple. It's just a pair of rhyming lines, and each line has 10 syllables. That's it. But in Dryden's hands, this simple little structure became an incredibly powerful weapon for political arguments. So why was it so effective? Well, that tight, balanced structure makes everything sound super logical and authoritative. The rhyme makes it witty and, crucially, really memorable, kind of like a 17th century soundbite that gets stuck in your head. It let Dryden make these vicious attacks that didn't sound like angry yelling. They sounded like majestic, undeniable truth. Now, this poem didn't just appear out of nowhere. To really feel its impact, we have to understand the crazy political drama that was going on at the time. What was happening in England that made Dryden feel like he had to write this? Okay, so it all boils down to this huge political firestorm called the Exclusion Crisis. King Charles II didn't have any legitimate kids. His legal heir was his brother, James, who was a Catholic. Now, this absolutely terrified most of Protestant England. So a powerful political group, the Whigs, led by our guy, the Earl of Shaftesbury, tried to pass a law to literally exclude James from ever taking the throne. This timeline really puts it all into perspective for you. It all kicks off with this completely made-up popish plot that stirs up all this anti-Catholic panic. That panic then fuels the Exclusion Crisis, where the Whigs push the Duke of Monmouth as this great Protestant alternative to the throne. And bam, right in the middle of all that chaos, Dryden drops his poem. It's basically a piece of royalist propaganda. But the really tragic part? The poem was also a prophecy. Just 4 years later, Monmouth did lead a rebellion, it failed, and he was executed.
So even though the poem was written for a very specific moment, the reason we're still talking about it today is that its message is, well, it's a timeless political warning. I mean, seriously, when you strip away the 17th century names and clothes, what are you left with? The seductive pull of ambition, the danger of weaponizing religion and fear, the classic fight between the rule of law and the will of the people, and of course, that eternal struggle between loyalty and betrayal. These themes are as relevant today as they were then.
And Dryden totally knew he had a hit. A second part of the poem was published, and even though another poet wrote most of it, Dryden jumped in and added about 200 lines. And in those lines, he used his signature wit to go after not just politicians, but his personal literary critics too. He was settling all the scores. When it's all said and done, Absalom and Achitophel is just a masterclass in political communication. It's the ultimate proof that a perfectly crafted piece of art, a poem, can be every bit as powerful as a new law or even an army in the battle for the hearts and minds of a nation. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on, one that feels, well, incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? In our world of memes, late-night comedy, and endless online commentary, where's the line? When does political satire stop being just commentary and start becoming a weapon?